Namaskar and welcome live on this show today. And welcome to all the people from East Coast, West Coast, and Israel and other places. If you're watching it, forwarded links won't work. So please, if you want to see the video live, you have to access one of your local coordinators. And so there's no point in forwarding it. Once it goes live on YouTube, do watch it, like it, subscribe it. And that's what we wait for. So today's topic is very, very interesting. There is 8 slides which Nilesh ji has prepared for us, and we will discuss them, and which is primarily based on Dwarka flooding. And when did Dwarka flood? We all know when Krishna left the planet, he willfully submerged Dwarka under the sea, so that the main reason was that people do not consider him as an ordinary human, and also he had also promised that entire Yaduvansh will go, because if Yaduvansh was there, nobody would be ever able to rule the planet. So his whole family went with him, and that's a devotional viewpoint. And I have a very renowned scholar, speaker, and a very good friend, dear friend, Shri Nilesh Oak ji, to speak to us. So Nilesh Oak ji, welcome to the show.
Namaskar Aditya ji. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to talk about the Dwarka, Krishna's Dwarka, its establishments, how old back the history is, but also its destruction, after the Mahabharat war.
So as per Mahabharat and the dimension, and also Srimad Bhagavatam also corroborates it. The dimensions of Dwarka were roughly the size of New York City, NYC, and which is 24 miles by 24 miles, which is 576 square miles. That's if you calculate in terms of yojana, there can be here and there, but in today's miles, that comes out to be, assuming that 1 mile, 1 yojana is 8 miles. So coming that with that calculation, I came up to the number of 576 square miles, and it was square. It was not rectangular or anything. Like Ayodhya is rectangular, 96 miles by 24 miles. But Dwarka was square, and it had sections for different parts of the society. So without delay, I would like you to make an opening remark and also show us when did Dwarka flooding began, please.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about, before we come to Mahabharata times, and then of course the Krishna's migrating from Mathura, like central India, you can say, to the west coast of India, where the Dwarka is or was. Dwarka, the place or that area, has a much deeper antiquity than even what is, timing thinking of Krishna's Dwarka, which is a Mahabharata times. And based on my calculation, that goes back to more than 7,500 years ago. But what has happened is there were many excavations in the Dwarka area, and some of the objects they found objects which are dated to almost all the periods that you can think of going backwards. So, for example, if you want to find the object that was found there 1,000 years ago, yes, they found it. 2,000 years they found it. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. All the way back, it goes to 32,000 years, 29,000 BC or 30,000 BC. So there were objects found that far back. And sometimes, therefore, people confuse. People say, oh, so Krishna, Dwarka is that far back, so Mahabharata happened that long ago. Well, that is not the case. What has happened is this. If you go look at the Yaduvansha, and you refer to Yaduvansha, and the Yaduvansha we can use as a broad term, but within that there are Vrushnis, there are Andakas, and this is all the Trasadasyu line. So for example, one of the key line from the Vedic times is the Trasadasyu line. And in another way, if we go backwards from a genealogy point of view, going back to Srimad Bhagavad Puran, so Manu had like 20 sons. He may even had actually more sons, but the 20 distinct sons names are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavad Puran. And among them, when you go and trace the genealogy from Revat, from Revataka, Revat, and therefore Revataka. And that is who established a place known as Kushasthali, which is in that Dwarka area. And so we don't know exactly how long ago was that. Definitely thousands and thousands of years ago. But just from a archaeology evidence, we can say that this could be as early as 32,000 years ago, or could be earlier. Okay, so that's the original story of Dwarka. It was not called Dwarka, it was called Kushasthali. Now quickly come to Mahabharata times, which is more than, say, around 7,500 years ago. So now Krishna, after he killed Kamsa, and then he reestablished Shurasena, back to the throne. Okay, but they were these all Yadus were always finding a threat from Jarasandha, and because of that, they finally decided it is a lot easier to just go away from it. There are a few other theories. I'll not go into that, but that's how actually, if you see, Krishna's Dwarka was super rich, and one of the reasons was a commerce. Like, with coming to Dwarka, it allowed them to navigate, and it allowed them to do commerce with rest of the world, and all these wonderful things that are happening in India. So Dwarka was super rich because of it also. So then Krishna came to Dwarka with the whole Yadus came, they established, and you beautifully described the city. In fact, I did not know those details of those descriptions that you described, like the rectangular shape. Now, as you may know, it had the bridges connecting to the mainland. So, of course, it was almost on the mainland, but it was also like a island. It has its natural moat, and it was protected. But there were bridges, and it was well established that there were well established protocols to protect Dwarka. So there were these bridges, and sometime they know that the enemy attack is coming. They had an ability to control the bridges. They had also nice protocol, like for example, the dancers and the artists who may act as a spies on both sides. So they were so visiting artists, visiting dancers, they were removed at the time of any external attack. So that's how the statecraft was managed in the Dwarka. And then we'll go into the destruction part. But
So
that's what the
you
Krishna's
mentioned very
Dwarka was.
accurately about the bridges also, because there is a mention of Shalya.
Hmm.
He used a plane to attack
Yes.
Dwarka.
Yes.
And he was circling around it, and he was throwing stones and other things from the plane. And
Correct.
then Krishna had to actually cross over the mainland
Uh-huh.
and then fight with him and push him as far as Pragjyotishpur.
There you go. So across India, practically,
Across like the northeast India, like you cross
Yeah,
diagonally across the India from Dwarka.
yeah, all the way from west coast to east coast. You can not east coast, but eastern border. Yeah,
Northeast border Pragjyotishpur. So
yeah.
many of you viewers do not know about Pragjyotishpur. It's the ancient name for Guwahati today, and that area.
Hmm.
Not exactly the same, but there is a temple
Hmm.
in mentioning the name Pragjyotishpur. So if you go to in Guwahati, there are some temples there of Krishna showing the same pastime of killing the Shalya.
Hmm.
So now coming back to you, so you also mentioned the bridges, which I can accurately verify that, because yes, it is mentioned there,
Hmm.
and also there are skyscrapers mentioned in both Mahabharata as well as Bhagavad Puran.
Correct.
And the skyscrapers were mentioned, and the number of bodyguards of Vasudeva was also living there
Hmm.
along with his other
Correct.
Devaki, and
Yes.
was living there. So it's also mentioned there large palaces and the large number of bodyguards. It
Hmm.
is said that Maharaj Ugrasen was also there.
Yes.
Maharaj
Yes.
Ugrasen, who was the
Yeah.
leader of the entire country, Dwarka,
Right.
he had the bodyguards of 10 million men.
Hmm.
So very heavily populated city.
Yeah.
So with that, I think my question to you is, how does this like when did it go down? And I think you need to go into deeper that. I think your slides also.
Yes.
And when it go down, how did it go down? And because the Puranic explanation of it is going down is that as soon as Krishna left the planet, the ocean submerged it. Very simple explanation.
Okay. Right. And you will find those descriptions in Puranas, and they can come both ways, which is to say that Dwarka flooded, Dwarka was destroyed because Krishna tells Arjuna how to take care of it, and almost like he predicts that this is going to happen. That is the one version of the story that you hear. What we can summarize from that, because we don't have the very precise details, is that Krishna's passing away, which is Krishna's completing his pastimes for this incarnation, you can say, or this time around, and the flooding of Dwarka, it almost happened simultaneously. Now, if we have to think in terms of the timing, so for that as a reference today, we will not go how we arrived at 5561 BCE for the year of Mahabharat war. We will assume that that's how we arrived at. Some other time we can actually go into the wonderful evidence of the Mahabharata text itself for the war. But what this is important, once we decide, once we agree that 5561 BC is the year of Mahabharat war, Mahabharat text tells us that Dwarka was flooded and destroyed because of flooding, okay, and possibly seismic, seismic activity, earthquake. Now, whether it was earthquake or because of the water gushing in, like the whole land getting destroyed, the same thing. That happened, Mahabharata tells us, 36 years after the Mahabharat war, and many other Puranas also confirm that. Okay, in this one they are in agreement. So if we start with 5561 BCE, then add 36 years to it, we get 5525 BCE, because in reality we have to subtract, because we are in a before common era, right? So we have to subtract 36, we get 5525 BCE. And then the question comes, so if Dwarka was destroyed, Dwarka was disappeared, Dwarka was gone in 5525 BCE, do we have evidence in support of it? Okay, because if it's a place around the ocean, you will always have floods, we will always have tsunamis, but do we have some distinct evidence? Okay, so I'm going to start sharing the slides. So let me see. Okay, and tell me when you can see my slide on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so what I just told you is what is summarized there. So if 5561 BC is the year of the Mahabharat war, then you add 36 years to it, and it takes us to 5525 BC. That is the claim, okay? For just now, for our viewers' understanding, like this is how we test anything in science, right? So this is our claim. Let's say this is our claim that 5525 BC is the year of the flooding and destruction of Dwarka, okay? So if we have to apply this logic of scientific discovery, this is the triangle of explanation, prediction, and testing. Okay, so let's fill this prediction here. So what we are saying based on this is that it is our claim, okay, that anumana, inference, that the flooding of Dwarka took place in 5525 BC. Now the question we should ask is there evidence? Is there any pramana, pramana in support of that statement? And most important, for example, many times in the Adityaji, many times we will get these references from different grantha, the Puranas, whatnot, right? That will say so such and such a thing happened. Now that is also a pramana, but that is a Shabda pramana. Okay, and in our Darshana system, the Pratyaksha pramana is considered the highest, and then Shabda pramana also is considered good, but even there is a below, like Arthatpatti, Arthotpatti, or Anupalabdhi. Those are even further inferior pramanas, inferior in the sense of science I'm talking, but the highest is Pratyaksha. So the question is, do you have the evidence, but also is it objectively testable? And until we know what the problem is, and until we know what kind of evidence we are looking for, we wouldn't know what kind of background knowledge, like agama, that we need. Okay, and so in this case, what can be the evidence? In fact, in Mahabharata it talks about like some eclipses happening, but then I mean that's true, and that can be shown to be true for 5525 BC. Absolutely, that's not an issue. But also we must remember that the eclipses happen, at least 2 eclipses happen every year. Whether it can be seen in a particular place is a different issue, but around the world 2 eclipses happen every year. So it's not such a rare thing as much as we think. Okay, so let's go beyond just astronomy type of evidence in this case, because it's like a flooding and destruction. So do we have evidence? And the answer to that question is actually yes. We have tons and tons and tons of evidence around the world, and of course on the west coast of India where Dwarka is. Okay, so I'm just going to mark those. So we don't have a time to go through all of those, so I'm just going to select 3 specific instances of evidence, okay, because it's a very clear, very crystal clear evidence, and our viewers can understand it well. they can go back. This is all of this is a peer reviewed evidence, peer reviewed journals published. They can go and they can read these papers. So where is this evidence coming from? This is the whole map of the world, right? So oceanography evidence, because it has to do with the flooding, the sea water going into the city of Dwarka and destroying it. First piece of evidence, I'm going to discuss three. First piece of evidence comes from very close to America, North America, from the Caribbean area, okay, from Barbados and 6 other locations. The second piece of evidence, and we have a team, we have viewers from Israel, Tel Aviv based viewers. And for, the second location, it is in Turkey. It is right in Istanbul. So not far from where they are. This is Turkey. And of course, because we're talking about Dwarka, we have to have some very clear evidence from Dwarka. So that is from the west coast of India, the whole Arabian Sea. So we will talk about these three. So let's begin with Caribbean. As I said, the significant evidence comes from the Caribbean. The first starting point was Barbados, but not limited to Barbados. They found exactly same evidence at 6 additional locations from the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, I want to quickly show what this graph is showing. Okay, on the y-axis, it is the increase in the sea level. That's what you are seeing. Where the point is, the curve going up, it is going all the way to our present time. Okay, and so if you look at the timing, the x-axis, so that people don't confuse, you see the number 20 at the end. That's 20,000 years ago on the x-axis. And now we are coming towards the left on the x-axis, sort of a reverse direction. 18, 16, all the way to 0 is our time today. Okay. And so there are these different time brackets. You can also see that on the top, by the way. So there is a top, you have another scale there. That's kind of easy to see. And the specific one that I want to focus on is that CRE3. Now, what are we seeing here? For last 20,000 years or so, after the low glacial, the glacial maximum, they call it, right? Once that was reached, extremely cold around the world, especially Northern Europe and whatnot, the temperature started going up, and therefore the ice started melting. There are many other phenomena, and the water level in the oceans started going up. That's what we are seeing in this graph, from 20 all the way up to 0, So it's like going sort of reading in the backward, Start here and go up water to our times. Now there are 3 different CREs. They stand for catastrophic rise event. We are not going to look at those 3. We are only going to focus on this CRE3, catastrophic rise event number 3. What it is telling us, and this is from 7 different locations, based on the evidence from 7 different locations. Aditya, just for a what we call tidbit. When I was doing my master's in Canada in chemical engineering at University of Alberta, this person, Dr. Paul Blanchon, he's from Mexico. He was doing, this is his study, by the way, peer-reviewed journals, but he was doing study in the same university. I mean, actually like a stone's throw away from my building. I used to go to that building all the time. I did not know him, in geology. And so he could dive, and he had a diving team because people had to go underwater to actually do this research. What that is showing is that in 7.6 Ka, which is to say 7,600 before present, or simplify 5,600 BC, 5,600 BCE. In 5,600 BCE, what CRE3 evidence is telling us is that there was a sudden rise of sea level of how much? 6.5 meters. And this is average, okay? 6.5 meters plus minus 2.5 meters.
20
okay?
feet.
Uh-huh.
20 feet.
There you go, right? Just imagine this. And in a very short time, and I'm going to tell you how short time it is, and it just gets impressive as we go towards Dwarka. A sudden sea level rise of 6.5 meters, you said that's a 20 feet. Just imagine that happening to any of the coastal places, like San Diego there, or LA, or Mumbai, or New York, I mean, all these places, Amsterdam, just imagine what a havoc it would be. It was there, and it's amazing. I mean, multiple studies verifying this. Now, when did it happen? I just told you. I'm going to convert that so that we can relate to 5525 BCE. So the timing of that is 5600 BCE, and the error range, because that's how you get in the research, is a plus minus 100 years, plus minus 130 years. The important point I want our viewers to understand is that 5600 BC plus minus 100 years or plus minus 130 years has 5525 inside that bracket. Okay, the predicted year for the destruction of Dwarka. So that's my evidence number one. Okay, and we are going to bring it all together. Now I'm going to take you all the way to the border of Europe and Asia. Okay, so we are in Istanbul now, if you look at the map. And what you see, if you start from the bottom left hand side, what you don't see there is the area of a Mediterranean Sea that turns into Aegean Sea, and you can actually read there, it gets to Sea of Marmara. This is on the south side. And on the north side, we have a Black Sea. And what connects these two right now is that Bosphorus channel. Those of you who have traveled to Istanbul, by a plane, you would see just before it lands at the airport, you're going to see Bosphorus channel. You just cannot avoid it, Now, what is interesting is that this is a work of, what I'm going to tell you, is a work of two geologists from Columbia University. Okay, Professor Ryan and Professor Pittman. And they wrote a book in 1998. And I published my Mahabharata timing book in 2011. But I did not know about this book. And I'll briefly tell you the very interesting story of this, Aditya-ji. From all these different sources we get this. Krishna's mercy, it can come from all kinds of places. Very, very fascinating. But first, let me tell the story. So what happened was, the Black Sea, that is a saltwater sea now, it was not a saltwater sea. In fact, it was not this big. It was a small sweetwater lake with whatever the name that the locals might have called. What happened again is that suddenly at one point, the sea levels went up and the Mediterranean water started gushing into Aegean Sea water into Sea of Marmara. And also at the same time, there was a heavy rain on the other side. The monsoon has also gone up into the Asian parts, okay, the northern Asia, north of Black Sea, that area. And so that lake was also flooding. But eventually what happened, the saltwater pressure and saltwater force was so much that it broke through the Bosphorus channel. Okay, there was no water going back and forth at that time, but it broke through and the salt water started gushing into this sweet water lake. And instantaneously, practically speaking, it turned into from a sweetwater lake to a saltwater ocean. And that is now a Black Sea. Now, Aditya-ji, if I ask you, if I want to guess you the timing of this event, what do you think that would be?
I think it should be the same as Dwarka flooding.
Yes. So and I'm going to show you how many indicators. Okay. Now the timing of this. So if they are showing the model here. I'll go to the right side. The gradual flow model will look like this. The first part, whereas the catastrophic flow model, look at the curve at the bottom. There was the saltiness becomes sudden saltiness. And how do they know that? From the mollusk and all that they find. Which suddenly died. The sweetwater mollusks who are not used to salt water, they died and they got trapped into the bottom. And when they were dated, that is the one way of dating, not the only way. It takes you to the timing of Dwarka flooding, 5525 BCE. Okay, I'm going to show you that. But something more. If you look on the left side, there are 9 different scientific measurable parameters. Like they're named like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you go from the right, and I don't want everyone necessarily to worry about the technical details, but these are different measurements like grape, titanium, calcium measurements, the size calcium measurement, calcium carbonate measurement change, and so on and so forth, the oxygen content and so on. But what you will find is all of them exactly match. And look at the x-axis there, 5,000 to 10,000. And the last line from the 5,000, when you go towards 10,000, the vertical line that is drawn is exactly at that 7,500. If you notice that, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but
yes, that's right.
Right here, So it is coming from the right, so whatever the change is happening, and all these 9 parameters, distinct changes takes place exactly at that 7,500 mark. And there are many ways you can actually date it, that particular thing. And indeed, it comes to 7,550 calendar years BP, which is converted to 5550 BC. Now the error bar around this is even more accurate. You know, the error around this is even shorter, like a plus minus 30 years, plus minus 40 years, plus minus 50 years. Very, very accurate measurement. So 5550 plus minus, let's take 50 years, which tells you that the 5525 falls inside this. Okay, so that's my second piece of evidence. Let's quickly go to the third piece, and that is really nice. Now we are coming to India. Dwarka region is on this side, and for the benefit of our viewers, after this program, they should go to YouTube and type underwater and Graham Hancock, you know, Graham Hancock name and underwater, or Glenn Milne, you know, who is the geologist now in Ottawa. I'm in I'm in communication with him. So Graham Hancock and Glenn Milne, they together also studied the west coast of India, and what they found also matches with 5525 BC, but we will not cover that today. But what I want to show you right now is this area. Now this area is absolutely well studied. They studied it for oil exploration purposes, they studied for many other purposes. But the bottom line is there are some 30 plus studies over last 50 years, okay? And what you're seeing here is a summary of those 50 studies. In fact, I am going to take you even further and take you to another refined study, which is a combination of all those studies into one study, what you're seeing on the left side. One quick thing I want you to notice is this, you know, so just so that everyone understands, the vertical y-axis is the sea level. And where you see this MSL 0, mean sea level, which is where the sea water today. And just do keep track of that, Aditya, because it's very important for the whole Sindhu Saraswati civilization. And I'll quickly connect that also. Okay, so what happens now? We are starting from the left here. The scale is kind of done the other way now, how it should be done. So from 9000 BC, if you look at the top, 8000 BC, 7000 BC, 6000 BC, 5000 BC, all the way to 0. And then we have a 1000 CE, 2000 CE to our times. Okay, so this is our times. If you notice, that is between this 5000, so 6000 BC and 5000 BC, which is a 6th millennium. So where my cursor is right now. And so from the middle, if I just draw a vertical line sort of coming down, what you find, this is the evidence. Now you can do the multiplication for feet. I will tell you in meters, okay? In 6th millennium BCE, sorry, 6th millennium, in the middle of 6th millennium, which is again 5525, you know, right there, BC, there was a sudden increase of an average 15 meters, 15 meters. You can see that actually from here. So let's take even here. Actually, it could be longer. It could be even a 20 meters, you know, from here. But even if you take from say 15, because there was a peak here, 15 to 0, there was a 15 meters sudden rise of sea level on the west coast of India or in the Arabian Sea. Now, how much is that? 15 times 3, 45 feet. Yeah, this is all again published data. Okay, so 15 meters. Now it didn't stop there. What happened? Because, you know, remember, if you notice from 6,000 to 4,000 or slightly half, like 5,500. By the time the signal kind of ended, 4,500, there was an additional 8 meters. So between that time, there was a total of approximately 23 to 25 meters. So like a 70 feet kind of a sea level rise. Now, what happens is, depending on the location, we don't know how far Dwarka was up at that time, right? So immediately it may not be affected, but they were noticing these changes. So 20 plus meters of sudden sea level rise. And that is, when did that happen? Again, exactly the same timing, right in the middle of 6 millennium BC. But let me quickly go. I don't know how much time we have, because I think I took a bit longer time. Tell me quickly how much time we have.
No, you go ahead. Let's finish. People are very much eager to see this.
Okay. So now I want to, so that basically 3 evidence, one from Caribbean, one from Turkey, and one from right on the west coast of India, showing a sudden sea level rise of 6.5 meters, or suddenly the Black Sea becoming salty water sea, or 15 to 20, 23 meters rise. Okay. So that explains the flooding of Dwarka. But something else I want to show you, and why we lost so much memory of a Dwarka and why there is so much confusion with the location of Dwarka. Because now we have 6-7 different Dwarkas, as you mentioned, I think last time in the, there are many Dwarkas, right? Mula Dwarka, then our currently where Krishna Mandir is. And why did that happen? It is because of this. When the water went up, this is our mean sea level, which is where the water level is today. But actually, notice this, the water had gone up by 3 meters. This is the signal, this is the signal going up to 3 meters. This is 5 meters here. I'm saying going up to 3 meters. And it stayed that way for, say, from 5000, 4000 BC all the way to 2000 BC. It was up above, which means what? Lot of land that we see today in, say, Gujarat or part of Rajasthan or now part of Pakistan, that was underwater for those 2,000-3,000 years. And so just imagine that, somebody knew, hey, this was my village or this was my town, but that is gone, and that is gone for 3,000 years before the water started receding backwards, and some of the land actually now came into view. So that's why it explains the confusion with the location of Dwarka and so on. That is one. But I'll just give you a quick answer. If we want to look for Krishna's Dwarka, right from Somnath, we need to go inside the sea based on all these studies and additional studies. Inside the sea, go in the southwest direction for, say, at least 20 to 25 miles, or maybe anywhere between that range, 20 to 30 miles, if you want to find Krishna's Dwarka. But quickly, let me mention the connection of this to Sindhu Saraswati civilization or the Indus Valley civilization. So, remember, we have a places called...
Going back to the same graph.
Same graph, yeah.
And at the zero level, and I'm looking at the x-axis, 1000 and 0. And
yes,
you show some dotted lines there.
Correct.
And what are those dotted lines?
Give me a minute, I'll come back to that and I'll explain what those dotted lines are. But what I want to show here between, say, 5000 BC and 2000 BC is this. We know the Indus Valley civilization during that time, whatever we call Indus Valley civilization, it's not a distinct different civilization. It is just a continuation of a very deep Indian civilization. Okay, but the Western view is if you find something, you just give a name after that. That's why the Mohenjo-daro, therefore they call it Indus. Okay, but my point is Lothal, or even possibly Mohenjo-daro or close to Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, then Dholavira. These were ports, and we know that they were ports. And people wondered, oh, what made them a port? Maybe the sea water, river water went down. Well, that could have happened. But this will tell you why Lothal was a port and why Dholavira was a port. Because the sea water was actually going much inland. And right now, Lothal and Dholavira are inland. But that time, they were very close to the ocean, and therefore they were ports. Okay, so that explains it. Now, quickly to your question. What happens is, if you notice after 2000 BC, that actually water level came down, but then it goes into that sinusoidal shape, like that, which is a very normal, what we, I'm a chemical engineer, we call instrumentation process control. That's a process control response, Say, for example, you take a water in the bucket and you give a disturbance so that it starts creating the waves. It will go through these waves and then eventually it will slow down and come to a level surface, So it goes ups and downs, that's what it is doing in a way. And that might actually explain, for example, Professor S.R. Rao, when he found some flooding happening around, say, 1000 BC, so if what is saw something or 1500 BC, so that is referring to this area here, and there could be mini floods or something like this. And that continued. So they had to abandon the ports or go away from the ocean or come close to the ocean. That was happening. So it is just a very natural response, how the geological phenomenon will come and stabilize, so that's that little bit of up and down. And that it's a dotted because it's a kind of circumstantial evidence. The evidence is not as strong as the evidence that you find for a solid line. That's what it is saying. Okay, so that's I think I'm done. But so again, this comes into right in the middle of the 6th millennium BC. So let me stop sharing. So that's quickly the evidence.
It's a very interesting way how you collected all these reports and predicted that actually scientifically that was possible. See, another description about Dwarka is And you also accurately said 20 miles.
Hmm.
And today also it is around 30 kilometers.
Huh.
If you go, that's where the people go under the water to see the Dwarka.
Hmm.
But my point is, they're not seeing the 576 square miles.
Correct.
They're just seeing some peaks, and they're seeing the boundary walls, and very well documented by National Geographic also.
Right.
And but the extent of the sea is not yet seen actually. The extent of the oceanography area.
Yeah.
So yes, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Is your question why we are not seeing the extent?
Yeah,
Okay. Just for a second, I was going to mention that point and then I forgot. I'm going to bring this back just for a second and tell me when you see it. You see this?
yes,
Okay, quickly. See, what happens is we are only, and this is very important, and you ask, I'm so glad you asked that question. We are, see, what I described to you is only the ocean level, like the top of the ocean. What I did not tell you, and it's not very easy to predict, what is happening to the bottom of the seafloor. Okay. And so what happens, it's a very complex phenomenon. There are, but what is happening, notice this curve here. I'm going to, if you can see my mouse cursor, so what is this? This is, it's a submarine platform. So as the ocean level changes, okay, if there is an island, it's the water level is going to dissolve that island, meaning it's going to erode the place and going to flatten it. But something else happens. When the water level goes up and sits at a certain level, the ocean floor, and this has been seen around the world, they call it delta formations, like, when the river meets the ocean, like our Ganga and Brahmaputra
yes,
meeting the Bay of Bengal. But what happens is the ocean floor starts increasing. Okay, so for example, this ocean floor, look here where it was at 25-30, and by the time in our times it has come up like a 15 meters. So the ocean floor also changed. So what that does is the hollow areas, there might be it might have come up, and actual Dwarka region might have been eroded by the water. So it's a very complex things to explore. It's a very muddy water, very cloudy water area to explore, and it's a very, very challenging thing.
so that's true. And it should be very cloudy.
Hmm.
But the National Geographic video that I saw, and everyone
Hmm.
else has also seen it,
Hmm.
I saw very specific way, and which is as matches the description of Bhagavad Puran as well as Mahabharata.
Hmm.
A particular spheres are there, which is the
Hmm.
top of the buildings,
Hmm.
and they might have fallen down also due to water pressure or the boundary walls, because boundary walls is a very common concept,
Hmm.
and the boundary walls are as high as 80 feet,
Hmm.
and not the small boundary walls. That must be the boundary around the ocean
Right.
to prevent the water from gushing in.
Correct.
And while Krishna was there at that
Hmm.
time, the water was already begin to start coming in.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they won't need such big boundaries.
Correct. And that's how he would have predicted that, hey, this is going to get destroyed too, because he's seeing it's coming, right?
Coming.
Yeah. Another quick point I will mention is, you see, this was like a metropolis. I mean, it was a metropolis, right? So there is this core Dwarka, but there is a extended areas which is also well built. Now some of it under ocean. So sometime when we find a structure, we don't necessarily know whether we are finding the core Dwarka or even extended structure.
Right.
So right now New York runs into New Jersey, and it runs further up north, right? Same thing has happened in Mumbai and whatnot. The reason I mentioned that is in the descriptions of Dwarka everywhere, whether Puranas or Mahabharata, you hear all the time they going casually all the way up to Raivatak mountain, which is on the land, and we know it's a significant distance, from
Right.
Somnath to Raivatak mountain. Yeah, so that was all Dwarka, greater Dwarka.
Yes. Revataka is part of Dwarka.
Correct.
It's like a Prabhas Kshetra is very close by.
Very good point.
And
Good
the
point.
Prabhas Kshetra is actually the place of pilgrimage from way before Dwarka also.
Yes,
Is a Rishi, I forgot the name of the Rishi who was doing tapasya there.
correct.
But Prabhas Kshetra is also the place where Krishna leaves the body.
Yes, and it was also a place for one what they call distributory of Saraswati.
Correct.
So distributor of Saraswati was coming to Prabhas too, just like some other distributaries were going between current Sindhu River and that Prabhas. So that's why it was. I mean, Balarama, Bhagwan Balarama starts his Saraswati journey, Saraswati Tirtha Yatra, and he does visit. He starts from Prabhas, from a Dwarka area.
Exactly, exactly. And I think Lomharsh, the Pulastya
Ah,
Rishi,
yes.
Pulastya Rishi, when he describes the tirthas of
Hmm.
to Yudhishthir,
Hmm.
and he starts with Pushkar,
Hmm.
comes down,
Hmm.
and it's very surprising. He doesn't talk about Dwarka.
Hmm.
So he doesn't talk about Dwarka, but he talks about Pravas Kshetra.
Correct.
And then he says that why Pravas Kshetra is important and where it is.
Right.
So Pulastya Rishi is describing the old, and I don't see Dwarka as a, so Dwarka would have been a very ordinary city and not
Hmm.
a place of pilgrimage according to Pulastya Rishi.
Yeah.
So, but will, yes,
Yeah. It may be a commercial place. See, Dwarka may
commercial,
be seen as a commercial place
commercial
and
place.
not necessarily a, what you just said, as a Tirtha Kshetra as much. Now it is a Tirtha Kshetra.
Now it is
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
because
Great point. That is a great
that,
point.
and also he also crosses the Arbu mountain, which is Mount Abu,
Yes.
but
Yes.
Sanskrit is called Arbu. Arbu.
Yes. Arbuja.
So
Yeah.
a lot
Arbuja.
of
Yeah.
these references are there, and really, I think many of the today we are being seen in Israel also.
Yeah.
But many people have interest in Dwarka far greater than any other place
Mm-hmm.
because it
Yeah.
sort of gives faith in Bhagavad Gita more. I think that's where they connect it to the speaker
Right.
of Bhagavad Gita. So there is another mention which I mentioned in the beginning, Shalya, using his
Hmm.
plane.
Yeah.
So when he is going the plains, there is a particular mention he moved around the coast over Dwarka and went back.
Hmm.
So that time also Dwarka is between the ocean
Mm-hmm.
and
Correct.
moats all around or the ocean all around. So
Right.
the only way he could attack Dwarka was through a plane. There must
Yes.
be sizable distance because
Right.
boats. So I think that with the boat with the current location of is right,
Yeah.
more needs to be done, and maybe our Israeli friends can help us with all the technology they have.
Yes, yes, and nowadays the different technologies are existing because you can see. I mean, I'm not expert in those technologies. They under what you call underground. They can sonar, like a ultrasound kind of thing, like a sonar technology they call, and they can see the structures below. And I think that is what needs to be employed, assuming it works underwater also, to because instead of physically going first, knowing the promising areas and maybe exploring it. Quickly, one point I'll mention because you brought it up, sage Lomash Rishi or other rishis describing this. See, when we talk of 7,500 years ago, the time of Mahabharata, do you know what has happened? The Saraswati, the golden period of Saraswati is already over. Saraswati is still there and still it has a lot of water. That's not the issue because monsoon has also gone up. In fact, I didn't show you, maybe another time we will discuss. The next one was a seismology evidence and climatology evidence, how it also matches for these 7,500 years. So monsoon has gone up. But the quick point I wanted to mention to what you just said is that when these sages in Mahabharata times are talking about the Tirtha Kshetra along river Saraswati, they are talking about the past glories of those Tirtha Kshetra. And what that means is even 7,500 years ago, these places were already very, very old,
Very old. That's right.
had a very deep antiquity.
Exactly.
And actually they had almost their glory had come down in terms of their magnanimity of the Saraswati flowing through them and so on. So that just also gives us a very indirect way, but gives us a very clear evidence of how far back the Saraswati went and the civilization around Saraswati.
Definitely. I think he's talking about Tirtha. That's why Paduri mentioned. He doesn't mention Dwarka.
Hmm.
Dwarka became later on as a Tirtha.
Correct.
So
Correct.
for him, he just went till Prabhas Kshetra. And
You
then
are
he went
absolutely right. Yeah.
further into Kaveri River Basin, which is the
Hmm.
central.
Correct.
And then he does touch the places of Bhagavan Ram because
Hmm.
it was a past time before happened.
Correct.
So thank you so much for this show.
Thank
And
you.
viewers, if you have any questions, I think the time is up. The links are going to get expired soon. But I really, really thank Nilesh for bringing this such an interesting analysis and also research that he has compiled over the years. Brings us very scientific And in any way, our history is old. Whether you say, whether you may agree with the dates or not, but we are talking about the timelines
Mm.
which are way older than any other civilization on the planet. So viewers, keep watching and do not forget to press the subscribe button and also hit the bell notification to get our content. And Nilesh and I will keep discussing many other points. I think seismic, climatic, we'll touch upon next week. And also we'll bring out some other relevant histories, especially with the Black Sea was very, very interesting. And so thank you all very much. Namaskar and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Aditya ji. This is